So it's like just a weird type of workout that comes out that exposes people a lot of times, but still is very hard to keep getting better at if you want to be rounded in the sport.
There's definitely people that are listening to this podcast right now that are listening like to us say, hey, you need to do this higher intensity stuff on longer rests, and they're going to try and do it multiple times per week. Listen very carefully right now. This is not something that you do twice or 3 times a week. It's something you do once a week or once every 10 days.
I mean, yeah, 25.2. Did you have anything that jumped out to you as a surprise from the first time we did it in regards to people's performances?
Surprise. I was surprised that Caden was sub 5 based on where his training was. He was 4:47. He almost beat Noah, which I was like, wow. Like, he's getting real fit.
This year Noah or last year Noah?
They did it together.
Oh,
they
cool.
did it.
Oh, he did it in Miami.
Yeah. Caden is down on spring break, and everyone was telling me he was out drinking and not being an athlete. And I was like, I think he'll be okay by the time Friday comes. And he went and did it with Annika and Noah.
Yeah.
So it was like a power trio on this workout. And he was sub 5. I don't know if Annika said her score publicly, so I don't want to blow hers, but she was very fast.
Oh, wow. Nice.
And she was 10th in the world.
I was about to say, I was really curious how she would do
18,
because she was really fast back then.
Yeah. I'll tell you guys off camera, but before this is out,
Okay.
I don't know if she'll have posted her score yet.
Why don't they guess in the
Annika
comments?
went really fast in a workout with bar gymnastics and squatting. I remember watching her in July.
Yes.
I was like, oh my God, she's so fast.
Yeah.
I saw it in the warm up. I mean, her cycle speed on all squatting and her cycle speed on the bar was just on bar gymnastics was just so much.
Sandbag one. I was trying to picture that.
Was so much faster than everybody else in warm up. I was like, you're going to annihilate everyone. And then she went out there and tripped over the bag and still annihilated everybody in a sprint.
It wasn't even close.
It's crazy.
I think there will be there's lots of people like Lex is really good at this type of a workout, and I'm sure there's other people that are going to be competitive, but her time will be like near best of the world. I guess that's not really a surprise, but just I was very impressed.
Unsurprising.
That is a good group to do that workout with.
Yes.
For a competitive push. I made the mistake one time, this is a long time ago, to go down to Florida. My roommate in college was getting married, and he had a bachelor party in Miami. And I was like, cool, I'll go down a few days early because it's the final week of the Open. And I hit up Noah and Guido, and I was like, hey, let me do the Open workout with you guys. And it was thrusters and chest to bars.
Oh,
and like
those are
with those two.
Yeah, with those two, they're like thruster chest to bar kings. Yeah. I got wiped. And then the humidity, like everything, it was just like a really bad experience. So I'm glad that Caden obviously crushed it. That's cool.
Another surprise. I mean, those big dudes, man, they put up big scores again. They were like mid 4s on this workout, Dallin and Jason Hopper, which again just impresses me. I mean, it just shows, I think the sport is evolving to the point that you can't have body weight or size be a limiter. Like your skill level can outpace that kind of like physics, I feel like perceived physics change.
I feel like Fikowski was sort of the first like really tall, like outlier, taller, really elite athlete.
But he Asia Bartow.
No, I do, but he was never a podium. He was never a podium athlete.
That's true.
That's what I was getting at.
He was podium.
But the difference is every year, Fikowski, well, not every year, but almost every year, even the years that Fikowski podiumed, he would have bad open finishes on these types of workouts. There were times where he was almost not making it to regionals and then podium at the games. These are like similar type size people that are now crushing open things. It was just a surprise.
Yeah, Asia Bartow one time in like a briefing, we had a regionals workout that had toe to bar, and the bar was set at a similar height all the way across, and it was really low. And he's like, hey, when I'm on the bar, like my feet are on the ground. And they're like, sorry. And he goes, okay. He was like, this is my life. Fine. But he just dealt with it and qualified for the games. Like,
Other surprising things, I don't know if they were necessarily surprises, but cool things to see is I came to Friday Night Lights this week and like talked to everyone that was there and paid more attention. And there were a lot of people that got their first muscle ups or had gotten their first muscle up the last time this came out and then crushed it and almost finished the workout. So this was a cool workout to rinse and repeat on 3 years later for people that are just doing CrossFit more recreationally, I think.
Go ahead.
I think along those lines, one of the things that really surprised me is I did the workout again. I did not improve. I was 24 seconds slower than I was in 2022, which is not that surprising. I mean, I'm a lot older than I was at that point. And Mike and I were talking about this, but we were coming off of our games team year. I had just got done winning Wadapalooza 35 to 39. And then like this was, you know, the open. So I was
Was
pretty
this
fit.
the year, were you 30, what were you, 36 that year?
Would have been 30, I think 37, because 36 I was team year, so 37.
Okay.
So I did not improve. And I was just curious how many other people improved versus did not improve in this workout. So I did a very informal Instagram poll and just said, you know, I've had over 250 responses now. Like, did you improve? Did you not improve? And it's surprising. It was like 36% of people did not improve. But most of those people are masters athletes. And actually kind of filtering through that group, it was a lot of higher level masters athletes, people who were probably pretty good in 2022.
Yeah.
And I used to think that maybe I could continue to improve this thing like indefinitely. I wanted to, you know, believe that, even though I know on the surface probably not. But like, I think we're starting to see some of that deterioration happen because people have been in, this is year 14 for me.
Do you think that there's anything you could have done to improve your time?
I'm going to.
We're going to try.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to try on Monday. And
I was 20 seconds is close enough that I feel like you could do better.
I was on pace to beat my 2022 time literally until the 15 thrusters. And then it was like a complete meltdown. Yeah. I went completely white. I was like basically throwing up in my mouth. I looked at the video. I was like, man, I felt like I was going to pass out on the last few thrusters. And then when I was watching the video, like my eyes were closed and like almost rolling back in my head. And then I laid on the ground for 25 minutes and had a pounding headache.
But I don't know if this is a surprise because I did this workout and it was gross and I remember it, but I was inside of this office with the glass door watching on Friday morning as the elites were going. And it was like Matt Gilpin with the last set of thrusters. And I was like, man, he's going to crush his time. And then he got to those last thrusters and he like started pausing overhead for a while. And I was like, oh no, it just got real. And then Gus was in the same position. Like he was crushing his time. And then he like went to do like rep 13 and it slammed back on his chest and he had to redo the squat and like just missed PRing. But that last set of bar muscle ups and thrusters for the elite group is just like the separator, but also the like the death bringer. Yeah. Like everyone outside puking and not feeling good.
That is why I wanted to put out a poll and figure out like what kind of percentage of people are improving versus not, because that morning I didn't improve. I don't want to like put everybody down, but I think there were probably 6 or 7 athletes here that redid the workout that did not improve. And in talking to them, every single one of them said that was like 10 times harder than the last time I did, 100 times harder. In my case, 800 times harder than last time I did the workout. So I think it was just interesting to see everybody's perception of the exact same workout slower, still being harder.
I think there's a lot to unpack with that. There's so much context
there.
Yeah. I mean, one, with it being so, just some things that we can start to talk about with that was, this was week 3 back in 22. And I really think that there is an impact of doing 3 weeks of the open. By the 3rd week, I'm actually feeling my fittest. I'm like very tolerant to pain and discomfort by that point. And those workouts that year were really nasty. It was the burpee deadlift one. The first one was the wall walk, box jump over row, I believe.
Yep.
So I remember by that point, like being a little more ready for like that kind of real tough lactic feeling where you're just somewhat blown up near at the end. I'm not saying that's an excuse on why everyone did worse, but I think that is something to consider. And then also too, like you're comparing to scores potentially for most people from their repeat, the second time they did it back in 22 versus right now their first attempt. So if they redid it and they're already within 15 to 20 seconds of what their last score was, if they redid it and now had that exposure, I feel pretty confident most people could improve.
Yeah, I think another just like unpacking.
Maybe
thing,
not you.
Another unpacking thing with that one is if you shifted your priority a little bit. So some people were like, I don't know, it seemed like CrossFit was maybe like coming off of COVID, and that year was kind of like felt like we were coming back up. People were getting used to the new leadership, and people were like more training to be a CrossFit athlete and crush that type of stuff. Now it seems a lot more people are doing team oriented stuff. And if you're doing team type training, that's kind of like interval-y, short burst rest, I feel like this type of workout could get like you're just less trained for it, because when you're doing it as an individual, you're doing so many things for time or AMRAPs where you're like tapping that max effort gear. Whereas when you're doing the interval stuff, I think you just get used to like sprint recovery more. And this doesn't allow that. It was just too continual and gross.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the one of the temptations that people fight against when there's a redo workout inside of the open is they game plan for the score that they want to have versus the score that they're probably capable of. And it becomes even more likely when you're looking at leaderboards from years past. Like you can see percentage breakouts, you can see best in the world times, people in my division, what they got. And it's really easy to sort of see, oh man, I bet I could do that. I bet I could hold on to these thrusters, hold on to these bar muscle ups. And it can be very deceiving because if you just inch outside of just your capacity just a little bit in the wrong round, then all of a sudden, boom, the wheels fall off, and all of a sudden you're 2 minutes slower than what you thought you could do. The other thing that goes into that was what Mike was saying before is it's really easy to get caught up in comparing to a PR, right? Like a PR, like Kyle and I had a whole podcast on PRs, like talking about all of the things, all of the factors that go into play when you're trying to PR. And something like a workout, it might be more likely to PR a workout than PR a lift, right? There's a little bit more room for error that goes into it. But you still have to understand that your PR probably existed in that perfect setup. Like maybe you redid it the second time, maybe you had a perfect strategy, maybe you slept really well, you were fueled really well, you were confident in your game plan, and now you're comparing to that. And just the fact that you didn't beat this perfect scenario before doesn't mean that everything else leading up to that was a failure, which is how people reflect on it now.
For sure.
So it's game planning going into it and trying to be like, what am I capable of versus what do I want to have? And also, too, making sure that you're still respecting the context that went into that score that you're trying to compare against.
I'm by no means trying to convince an athlete to be okay with not improving. Like that's part of it. That's part of sport. You take risks, you fail sometimes, and that's just perfectly natural. But I think put it in context as well. Like the pressure back then was very different. Right now, you've created this performance pressure of this comparison. So there's so many different elements. And even if you got within striking distance, 15 to 20 seconds, change your game plan a little bit and go redo it. Like you can absolutely still improve. And then the narrative is flipped instantly where you're like, I am better. Everything's happy. We're all good. You know? So all it takes is a couple seconds and you're like, all right. Yeah.
That's also an interesting point because it's not like in that 3 days. So, you do it on Friday and repeat on Monday. It's not like in that 3 day span, you all of a sudden got fitter. You just had better tactics, most likely. The experience of doing it the first time made you realize hey, I can go a little bit deeper. Or in my case, maybe you need to pull back just a little bit earlier. But it's not like you got fitter. So if your first perception after getting done with the workout and not doing better than 2022 was, wow, look how much less fit I am. And then 3 days later, you're better. It's telling you that it wasn't a fitness issue, that it's a tactical issue, most likely.
I've had that experience. When I did 19.2, I think both times or one of the times, the first time I did it, I think I got capped in the 275 bar. It was just something I was just not prepared for to push through mentally. And then I think I had the next time I did it, 3 days later, I've almost finished the 315 cleans, which is way better in that workout. And it was not anywhere near as hard. So something about the perception can change over a couple of days too, with the experience of that workout.
And also the expectation of the pain that you're going to face. I think a lot of people, if you haven't done that kind of workout in maybe 2 weeks, or if you haven't done that for the exact workout for 3 years, you forget what it feels like. And it's really easy on paper to write out your splits and be like, I'll feel fine when I get there. And then you go out there on the round of 18 oh boy.
That's what I was going to say is I think psychological expectations play a big role in this workout. You're right. If you have a score that you're chasing and you're in mid-workout and falling behind that pace, that can mess with people if they're like, well, I knew I should be there, which comes out more often, like he said, when he has this. And I had another psychological point that I can't remember, damn it. Anyways, but what I did see also is a lot of people improve this workout. So if people were just getting into CrossFit or, younger, Annika was only 18, I think the last time that she did it. So her experience as an athlete, this one I feel like gave an opportunity for huge gains also. If people were, go ahead.
No, I think where I'm seeing kind of the polar ends of the spectrum on people who may not be getting better is those that already have extremely efficient movement economy. In these movements, they're able to string together bar muscle ups very well. They have great upper body pulling capacity. They're very efficient with thrusters. Or aging masters athletes. That's where I'm seeing that it becoming extremely difficult to improve in those things, because on this end, if you already move really well, then it just comes down to raw speed, power, and toughness. And we'll dive into some of the limiters that actually maybe didn't yield improvement. But then for those, the large majority that probably are getting better, this is a workout that definitely year after year you could see improvement on, especially if your limiter the first time was like, you're just not great at muscle ups yet, or you weren't strong enough. Like, it's really clear that you can knock 90 seconds off.
Another psychological thing, the thing that I just forgot, was that this year that it came out, there was the 75% cut line, because that's what I was trying to aim for when I did it. And then when the final workout came, I had like a lot of mental reason for why
10% or 75%?
I think it was top 25% that year. And then the next
22?
year was top 10%.
No, it never. It was 10%. Yeah,
10%.
It started with 10% for quarters.
Oh, maybe I was fighting
it
for
was
top
the second
10%
year of
then.
quarterfinals.
Well, whatever. I remember there
You were
was
fighting for top 10%. I remember.
I was fighting for a thing that was within reach, that was reasonable.
Your right to party.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people were. Yeah, my right. I was fighting for my right to party. Yeah. Anyways, and I think that psychological thing is different and more motivating because you're chasing something versus what can happen when you've done it before is you're fearing what happens if I did all this work and didn't do better.
Yep.
And that psychological headspace can be really different when you're fighting.
That's what I was dealing with. And I didn't even have any, Adam and I were talking about this. I have no memory of doing this workout from 2022 for other,
for a variety of reasons.
For a variety of reasons. But like, I literally don't remember doing it, but because I have a score, because I had this tangible thing that I was like, well, this is the time I put up 6:53 or whatever. Like, I need to strategize and I need to engineer a way to beat that.
Yeah.
And I came up with it, and then I fell short. So it was like, going into it, I was way more nervous than week one. I was so relaxed. And this week, so much more nervous. And I was talking to Travis about it before he went out. And I was like, you ever feel like you have PTSD when you're repeating a workout? Like some form of this like really strong anxiety that, like, because you've done it once before, it's either you're afraid of the pain, you're afraid of failure, but that doesn't exist if there's not a previous score.
Built-in expectation for what your performance should be. And like, you feel that it's not judgment, but like you feel it, right?
Yeah, it's pre-judgment.
It's like pre-judgment from the universe.
You are worse.
You have a fitness boss, and you have to meet this quota. It's like, okay, man,
I'll do my best.
I'm trying so hard.
But I mean, for you in 2022, like you were talking about, you were in that realm that Mike was talking about in terms of the masters athlete who has really high movement efficiency, who's really experienced inside of the sport. Your margins are small. And so even knowing the context that you brought into 2022, the margins are still going to be really tight. But I mean, I like our chances to improve on Monday. It's just important to keep that in mind, to that universal expectation. Like, it looms large and it can push you over the edge in the wrong direction.
Oh yeah, I'm always going to improve. Well, at some point you're not.
Yeah. I mean, just because you worked on your squat strength, just because you worked on bar muscle, just because you got better in all of those, like, you're not entitled to a PR, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's still things that can go wrong. You're flirting with the margins, like, so often, especially in the sport. Like, that's why we do sport, right? Like, that you never know, like, nothing's ever taken for granted.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. And that's a conversation we have a little bit more often with masters athletes is there's almost like this kind of greed or this expectation that because I've just been training normally that, like, I'm always going to keep PRing in these things. And the reality is, like, you have to look at the context of where you were when you did the workout back then and now, and face those realities. And that's not me saying that as a masters athlete, you're not going to continue to get better. Like, you absolutely can. I've actually seen, aging masters athletes going up divisions, still improving in this workout. Yeah. They're working super hard. But for those of you like that aren't, like, don't beat yourself up, take time to consider, like, what were the circumstances back then and how's your life now and how's that different? And man, if you fall off like 15 to 20 seconds after 3 years of getting older and like taking on more things in life, that's pretty awesome. You have maintained a lot of fitness. Yeah. That's a celebration.
And when you're looking at the data of it, just like last week's workout, and you say, okay, well, what's the top 1% or top 2% in each one of these thresholds? They're dropping about by like 3 to 5% for each age group. Yeah. So it's like, all right, well, it's already baked into the data that there's probably some 3 to 5% loss in overall top end fitness, but it doesn't mean that you're going to match the data. You could be an outlier where you're like, oh, well, you had a shoulder injury that year that you did it. So this year your shoulder's healthy and you crushed your time, or, you were more of a beginner and you learned all the skills, but the context becomes more important. Whereas if you're a young athlete and you're just getting into the sport and you're kind of riding this development curve, you probably should be PRing something like this if everything went well, no injuries or any of that stuff. Like, you had consistent training both times.
The likelihood of that demographic PRing is probably higher.
Higher. But never a guarantee.
Yeah. It's like there is population level data, which is there's going to be this 3 to 5% decrease. But at the individual level, it's all about like, what is your history? Where are you coming from? What have you done in the past? How many years have you been doing this?
Yeah.
You know,
how much do you care?
Were you coming off a games year?
Yeah. Well, some people are like, in a certain year, they age up into the next division and they're like, all right, I'm going to focus fully on this. Then they're 4 years into their division. They're like, well, I know I'm not going to be the top, so I'm going to train 3 times a week. I'll do
Take
the
their
open,
foot off the gas a little bit,
and I'll wait for the next year. That context is very important in terms of setting PRs, like
That's
the mindset
actually
of it.
a really good strategy. So when we broke down the Masters data after the games this past year, there were, I think there was one person in the entire games who was in the last year of their age bracket who podiumed. And looking at the stats, like the percentage chances.
What a boss.
Yeah,
dude,
no.
that's pretty damn
They're the
impressive.
outlier.
Yeah, going into the next year, like everyone should be a little bit worried.
Yeah.
In the next age division, that like, oh, we got a podium guy coming up.
Was one of our points to talk about, now I'm kind of curious, and I don't know if we're going to get to it, but like, is this a good test of fitness, this one?
Let's talk
like
about the workout.
The workout itself. Was that
Yeah.
our bullet point?
No,
Did I
but it can
skip
be.
ahead?
I
It
feel
is
like
now.
the workout itself, and then I'd say the workout itself, and then let's make our way to actually getting into what some of the limiters were.
Okay.
Because I have a lot of good questions on that.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of people complaining that week 1 and week 2 are little people tests. And I know we already touched on this a little bit, but we've already seen some of at the individual level, there's some, some people that are larger athletes that are performing really well. And so I don't know how, valid that is. But looking at the scores on the leaderboard, there are a lot of people who did really well in week 1 who are not even finishing this week. And so I think there's we're going to see a massive shift in the leaderboard. So if your goal is to say this individual workout is a good test of fitness, is a little bit, I don't know if you can go and say like, hey, this is a good test of fitness, but together these two are going to filter the leaderboard in a way that is moving us towards a better test of fitness.
Yeah, like I mean, the reason I was curious is I watch Friday Night Lights, I watch elite athletes go, I go on YouTube and watch like different demos before we do this just to kind of get a gauge for it. And I'm always curious, like, okay, in an affiliate level, most people can't do a bar muscle up. So they're getting there, and the energy, the cool energy is the people that did focus on that gymnastics can have a major breakthrough under pressure, which was like, I had a couple conversations where it was like really heartwarming to like, they're like, man, I like put all this work in and it was cool to see it come out. So it's like, all right, well, that's cool. But if we're talking about a test of fitness at an affiliate level, if 80% of people are just racing to get to that point.
Why not just have them test the whole audience and say who can do a bar muscle up?
Yeah, exactly. Or just have it be like more couple rounds of the pull up and lighter thruster double under, and then go up to chest to bar and be more of that, because that would be like more inclusive. But I feel like this test is more good for like separating elite levels. Like if you're really good at all things CrossFit and you wanted to do like a competitive oriented test, this one I feel like is a kind of cool race that gets strong people and gymnastics people. Like it's almost kind of like balanced in that sense and provides some like fun and separation. But I don't know about like fitness test for the masses. Yeah. Just my personal observation.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. It does surprise me a little bit that this was the week 2 workout. I don't want to make the assumption that because of the pattern of the last few years, they kind of save the more complex for last. It seems like it makes sense to keep people engaged all the way till the end, but I didn't see any less engagement this week. Almost like because now the expectation is those are going to be there. Like there's going to be that one test that has that big limiter where you hit that breakthrough. I'm talking on the affiliate level.
Yeah.
So maybe that was part of the design, is maybe they're trying to throw a wrench in it that way. Maybe it was leaked and they're like, oh, we got to bring it out this week. I feel like they've done that before.
Yeah.
No, nothing's ever been leaked before.
Yeah, it's perfectly tight ship of communication.
I can't really comment on good tests of fitness because it's a series of tests, and at the end of it, then I feel like I can give a better analysis on, do I feel like it was rounded and so forth.
Does anybody know the percentage of people worldwide who actually finish?
I don't know yet. We can't probably wait till Monday.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with the setup of the test in terms of the advancing complexity. I'm trying to think more about Max's idea of like if there's 3 rounds, 2 rounds, 1 round, what actually changes at the elite level. Probably not very much. You're probably still separating from the people's abilities at that top end, but you might be getting closer to a general test of fitness for somebody who only has those first two movements.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because there's just not, I mean, I guess the tiebreaker maybe could potentially do that, but it doesn't seem like 21 pull-ups and 18 chest to bars is enough to do that.
You're still going for a tiebreak on either of them, right? But this one, it gives somebody with a little bit more ability to separate. Not that it matters too much if you're at the affiliate level. It just seems like it's maybe a more engaging workout. Like, it's the only thing I would worry about is if your workout's done after 5 minutes, right? Like, you're just going to be sitting there staring at the bar muscle up. It's cool to know that the experience that we had, at least out here, it didn't like disengage people just from the fact that they didn't have it. They still were in there, they're still fighting for their bar muscle ups. But that's something that I think needs to get taken into account and making sure that we are keeping people engaged. We're giving them something that they can try and chase in terms of like a carrot on a string to make sure that they're not just, all right, like a 5-minute workout. Why is this cool for me?
Yeah, like
But
what's
is that-
better for the
I was just going to say, is that necessary for it to be a good test of fitness? Is inclusivity or it? Well, I'm playing devil's
It
advocate.
gets back
here,
to
but-
when Max and I were talking about our open workouts. Like, what
Yeah.
are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to really try and pre-sort in terms of fitness testing? Or are you trying to be as inclusive as possible at this stage and still make sure that the people who are going to be fighting in August are get through, right?
Yeah, I mean, the actions and the messaging is that this is about the affiliate now. And it's a sorting filter to get you the 1% and 2%. So as long as it's like, does a decent job at that from a sports side, it's satisfied. So
Yeah.
it means mostly these tests are written for the affiliate. And when I look at that, I just wonder, is that the best way to do it? Like, okay, we'll build a test where most people are going to like literally just have to stop in the middle of the workout, or create a scale. And then it kind of pulls away from the community aspect, where I think if you say, okay, I'm going to build it so that if somebody's work rate is, they're not super fit, like elite fit, but they work for 12 straight minutes, that they're able to work for that whole 12 minutes or most of the 12 minutes, as opposed to just getting bottlenecked to something where it's like, all right, you're done.
Having the bottleneck, though, especially for a gymnastic skill movement, does create a lot of motivation to get that skill. It's
Yeah,
almost like the
yeah,
belt
yeah.
system in martial arts, where it's like, I have bar muscle up, so I'm a red
Yeah,
belt
yeah,
or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
But it creates a lot of
Maybe not red, but
Yeah, purple.
yeah.
It creates a lot of motivation to attain that skill. And I think, if you're an affiliate and you're running a big Friday Night Lights thing, well, it's an opportunity for you to engage with your community and be like, well, hey, I recognize that only like 10% of our entire gym community can do a bar muscle up. Let's spend the next 3 months building bar muscle ups, right? And building this capacity. So it's an opportunity to look at it and say, hey, let's develop this skill. So when this shows up again next year, we
it's a
can.
good point.
I think
'cause-
it's clear that they say with the scaling too, like if this isn't within reach and you have no interest in doing that, you should do the scale workout. And that should be a conversation beforehand. I don't think they're throwing it at everyone and saying, hey, everyone's just doing
Do
the
it.
RX and you're going to stand there. I think that those targets are so healthy in a community, taught correctly, to give people these targets to have ambition to chase for things that are out of reach and scary. Because when it happens, it's so good for the community, and like watching people achieve something that they've been working towards for months or didn't know they were capable of doing. The whole community sees that and like gets behind that. It's really cool.
Yeah, that is true. Cause I know Merrick trained with Travis and he had a great, he did all this gymnastics work and had a great experience. And then I was talking to somebody else who didn't have a great experience, and she's like, I'm going to work on my bar muscle ups now. So it kind of validates both of your points.
I like it.
So but that's class at the elite level.
Yeah.
Oh, what were you pointing?
I had something else, but sorry.
I mean, the same kind of thing exists at the elite level too. Like, we've seen it before when they first started bringing out pegboards, right?
Yeah.
And for the first
Or
year
cross
of that,
or crosses.
yeah,
that just pissed people off though.
Okay, just let's
Pegboard
not
was
do it
35
at
out
the
of 40 of
games
them.
level. All right?
Not even quarters. Everyone was like, I had people that were like, I'm just done with this. Like, I'm over it. Anyway, sorry. What were you saying?
no, you guys just shit on it. It's
Yeah.
fine.
Oh, you had a bad idea? I think the elites, I just like this test better than last week. Mostly last week I didn't like because of the walking lunge, which we already talked about. I'm like,
I know, right?
I just really don't like that. But this week,
Kind of like the double unders this week.
I guess.
What about somebody that didn't have dubs before?
And now they have double
Now
unders.
they have
I was
dubs,
just,
and now they
I was
get
talking about
treatment.
the. I
know what you're talking about. I know what you're doing.
The context
on
of
to
last
you.
week was
Throwing
Adam,
it right back.
how Adam was arguing that the walking lunges were irrelevant last week, and we said the double unders this week.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that. If this were a test and you're saying each component is important in evaluating an athlete's capability in the skill, I don't think 42, 36, 30 is enough double unders to do that. Because like I'm not trained and not that fit, but the amount of separation that Travis would get on me there is like super tiny on just that one component. And I feel like if the test is kind of well-rounded in the skills that are inputted in it, maybe should have just been a bigger number.
Or shuttles.
Ooh, shuttles.
See, and
shuttles with a logistic though.
No, but we already used 30 feet last week.
So do it again?
Yeah, why not use the 30 foot?
We almost, sorry to change gears, but we did almost start talking about the adjustments of workouts for fairness of height, which I'm just confused on this whole, like, has this always been a thing that people are really trying to push for more balance in the movements? Because I'm just, explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old, how the sport's been around this long, and this seems like now it's more coming to surface of like people putting in a lot of effort to make it fair. But I'm just confused because
who's putting in effort?
I don't know.
To
I
make
see
it
like
fair,
like online sources, like people making posts about it.
WOD Science put up a really good post covering this and talking about how if you, and Max, you and I have talked about this before as well, that the movement selection in a qualifier, especially a qualifier that has 200,000 people participating, really does influence what the top. It's not going to influence what the top 0.01% looks like that much, but it's going to influence what the top 1% looks like a lot, and what the top 10% looks like even more. And so the idea is that you want to choose movements that at least control one part of the work capacity equation. So if you think back to your level 1, you have power equals work divided by time, right? And there are, distance divided by time, or whatever the equation that they teach you. So basically we're trying to control one of those variables. So choosing like a walking lunge versus something like, I'm trying to think of a good move, a burpee, right? A burpee box jump over versus a burpee broad jump. That would be a really good example. So a burpee box jump over, a taller athlete has to, if they're facing the box, they're moving 6 inches further away from the box on the floor.
Yeah, to
then they're
approach
moving
it and jump over.
6 inches higher over the box, and their arc is 6 inches bigger, and they're moving 6 inches further on the other side of the box. So with each rep, essentially, if you just measure where their center of mass is at each point, they're moving 18 inches further. You do 100 of those, they've now basically moved like 180 feet further in the workout.
Yeah.
They've, and potentially more mass, but that's beside the point. But if you do a burpee broad jump, then everybody is moving their mass 30 feet every time you do the burpee broad jump. So you've at least controlled one of the variables of that work capacity equation.
That's never, I don't think, going to be input at the highest level of the sport. Like, I think you could create a cool subset of tests, or even in an online qualifier that does a good job balancing, but it becomes very hard in practice to do that.
I understand like the difference in, body types for different movements. I think where I'm just confused is like, are the athletes created for the sport, or the sport for the athletes? Because in basketball, it'd be like every time someone catches a ball, the goal adjusts the height. Now you can take the shot equally to what everyone else is shooting at, but it's a fixed height, and that's just the design of the sport.
I don't think that's a valid argument here, because this sport in basketball, there's measuring who can put the ball into the 10-foot hoop. That's like the sport, right? That's the game. But in this sport, they're saying, I think that's how they play.
Chris?
In this sport, they said, we're the test of fitness, and we're measuring work, and our test of fitness is a measurement of work capacity.
Yeah. So you're not doing what you say you're doing.
Exactly. Yeah. So really, when we use like the burpee box jump over example, the taller athlete actually has a more impressive and higher work capacity or power output, even if they're slower.
Yeah.
But they're ranked lower on the leaderboard because their time's lower. And so that is the argument against that entire premise, right?
I think it's always been the case, though. I think that the open, I haven't pulled all of the data, but if you just said, I'm going to factor in for body weight, I think lighter body weights are more favored for open tests, because they're almost always AMRAPs. There's way more body weight stuff. Each movement generally is going to take less time just to execute if you're smaller. There's only really like rowing and wall balls, I think, as it is a clear advantage to be taller. So I think it's just kind of like, you got to understand that it is what it is, and train to offset it pretty much.
Yeah. I feel like, sorry, I don't want us to get too off topic because it's a 25.2 podcast, but
thanks for that.
Yeah, no, I think that would be a really fun and entire episode to go through.
Yeah,
I agree.
Maybe the open should have weight classes.
I don't think the open should have weight classes. I don't think that's how you balance it.
I think it would be fun to sort the leaderboard by weight classes, though.
Yeah.
it would be interesting.
Because I'm probably, no. Yeah.
Hey, let's change topics. Here's another idea.
All right, fine. What's the next question, Mike?
Limiters. So, like, what held someone back in this workout? And I mean, it's very clear if you have a gymnastics limitation or if the thruster was extremely heavy for you. But I want to talk about some of those, but then also on the like elite end of the spectrum too. I have athletes saying things and asking questions. I just felt like I was super out of breath by the time I got to the thrusters, but I'm able to move it. So like, what's the limiter here in terms of how I would train to get better at that 6 to 7 minute time domain? Kyle's super excited.
Yeah. He just his chops.
No, I don't even know if I'm excited. I'm just thinking about the workout and like the way that I felt getting to the thruster, the final thruster bar, the set of 15. And then the way that I felt in the set of 15, like the difference between those two feelings at like 5.5 minutes and at 7:15, the difference in those two feelings was insane. And for me, and Adam and I talked about this, like we've been, I'm doing a high rocks with you. And so I've been doing a lot of this like sub threshold running type work. And I haven't done a lot of stuff where I like go and touch that really, really high intensity, high power output type work. And when you don't do that, like you're just not prepared for it. And so I think a lot of times when, at least the way that I've always looked at the sport, like most of the sport, if you can build someone's lactate threshold really high, they can do the majority of these workouts. Last week, for example, they're going to perform extremely well in a workout like 25.1. And the majority of the workouts across, like if they're a semifinal level athlete, you'll get them to semifinals and they'll do really well at semifinals. If you can get them to the games, most of the workouts they'll do really well. But there's always these one or two, sprint style workouts that just take the power output that much higher, that have so much metabolic acidosis and so much, people want to talk about hydrogen and lactate and all this stuff. It's just like you get to a point where you can't do the work. You can't hit the power output required without producing all of this. And this metabolic.
It's a limiter that's less about the movements and just more about you as a system.
Yeah.
Operating under the assumption that you can do all the movements really well and pretty fast. It just comes down to what's going on internally.
Yeah. And these ones are, so there's lots of different ways to categorize limiters. And one of them that like, I think a WOD science or like, scientific way of looking at it would be physiological limiters, which is based off of generally cyclical endurance research. What we've found and from kind of studying people is that these types of workouts are very hard to say, oh, well, this is like your respiratory system breaking down, or like this is the muscular system of your grip breaking down. There's so many. There are super high force contractions. Heart rate is pushed from the amount of work that you're doing. It's also being pushed from a contractility perspective because you're pushing against external loads and
which
doing
increases
reps.
Blood pressure. So you're pushing against a higher pressure.
Yeah. So
which makes you feel like you're out of breath as a result.
Yeah. So I think when I think of like this type of workout as a limitation, I kind of break it into like, did you do sport preparation properly? Because I think a lot of people just didn't prepare for this type of workout as much because you think of the open as like super high volume gymnastics. Pacing. Yeah. And so sometimes people just undertrain this type of thing in preparation. So that sport specific side of it. And then everything else I think is a little bit more individualized. It's like, are you not strong enough that you can't, like that the weight at 135 or 95 is just too big of a percentage for you? Are you not enduring enough that you could cycle it at speed while being near your max heart rate and failure? Is your grip strong enough to hold on to the bar muscle ups when you're like, have already accumulated a bunch of these contractions and done this and loaded your wrist here? So this one I think is very hard to just like simply classify. There's like strength limitations, breathing limitations, skill limitations, gymnastics limitations. And I see it as very individualized as like what people are getting out of the workout.
Yeah.
But I also think that trying to train to replicate the feeling of this workout is not the way that you improve your ability to perform in this workout. And I think that is a mistake that people make, coaches and athletes, over and over and over, that like you don't just need to go out and do workouts that bury you in the same way as this workout.
Yeah.
Like, that's not necessarily the best strategy to prepare and get better at something like this.
Speaking of that, me and Adam, I think we think a lot in in training, but we approach, I think, coaching very differently, like different coaching models, different levels of aggression, whatever. And we kind of just come to the same outcomes through different means. And Chris K did this workout, and I remember, did this gross, very linear thruster progression. I think both him and Matt Gilpin both did it. And it was very structured, same every week, not really as a energy system written, which is what I think most people would do this, get crushed and be like, I need to do more like lactate work. I need to like hurt more and suffer more. And you can do that, but it's also, I think, specific to the movements. And he kind of ran more like, they were like strength endurance progressions, would you call them? The thruster progressions?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Could you just explain maybe like what they were, how long they were?
So week 1, it was 3 sets of 10 unbroken at 185. So that's 30 reps for time. But what I did is I put a stipulation in that they had to be done in sets of 10 unbroken. Week 2 was 3 sets of 15 unbroken at 135. And then week 3 was 3 sets of 20 with double dumbbell at 50. And so we rested after that, and then we reran it with 12 reps, 15 reps. 12, 18, and then 24. What I'm trying to do with that is I'm not only trying to build endurance inside of the pattern, but I'm also trying to build awareness around what they're doing. So by stipulating unbroken reps, they have to understand how long they can rest in between sets. If I just went out and said 30 reps for time, they might start with 15 to 20 and then take a huge long rest, be completely unaware of how long they're resting, what the transition time looks like, and then try and finish with singles.
Yeah.
So the unbroken sets on that is a really important stipulation to try and prepare them for something like this. And so when Chris and I saw the workout and we're looking at that last set of 15, like we know physically he could do that. Like we know what he can do, but we also know that he can do that when he's tired because he's done it so many times now. Yeah. So what we're trying to do when you set up that strategy for that workout is get him to that point in the workout to feel like he had just done 2 sets unbroken before it, but not any more than that. If you go any more than that, it doesn't matter what your training was like because you already dug yourself into a hole. So part of it is like helping them to build the confidence and the self-image to back themselves inside of that moment, but also the self-awareness of what they should feel like before they start, before they pick up that last bar.
Yeah. And that, I feel like that kind of model could be applied in this workout to just the gymnastics. I don't think the double unders mattered that much, so maybe not the double unders, but if it were like 200, 150, 100 of double unders in there, you could run that same type of like repeated linear progression on a skill for double unders or the chest to bar muscle up. But I think bar muscle up was like the bigger limiter of this. So just getting people comfortable being wrecked and super tired and super muscular at fatigue, but still train the density of the movement.
Yeah, I think I think it can be done similarly for bar muscle ups, but the really important thing there is somebody who's failing bar muscle ups, so they didn't hold their rep scheme. Like it's not just, all right, go spend more time on bar muscle ups. It's go try and spend more time on bar muscle ups in a sport specific format that's just outside of your reach. It's like what Kyle was saying. It's like, I'm not just going to go redo this workout every 2 weeks and expect to get better. I need to understand where I'm at and then try and just barely pull myself above that capacity week by week.
It'd be
just
like,
try and get better
at
it.
3 sets of 30 calories, echo, 20 thrusters at 115, 10 bar muscle ups.
Yeah.
Resting, at least as long as you worked,
Rest
or maybe
a lot.
1.5 times or 2 times as long as the work, and do 3 sets of that. That would be a much better way, at least in my opinion, to improve the bar muscle ups in this workout than just doing this workout a bunch of times.
Yeah, I think the thing there to that would help for someone that wants to know, like, how do I run a progression similar to that, is to make sure you're manipulating the rest correctly, because in this format, we're trying to create more intensity and improve the ability for you to produce power in a shorter time domain like that. So a lot of rest is needed, and a lot of CrossFitters hate that. They hate doing really short, intense efforts and taking a long amount of rest because they're so used to, like, no, just let me rest a minute and make it really hard. I feel like it's improving my fitness. Yeah. But in reality, that's not setting you up for success in these types of workouts all the time.
I feel like the name of this workout and the name of that training style is like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Right? Like,
yeah, just because you can rest 2 minutes.
Just because you can like rest less now in your training, or just because you can go unbroken early on, doesn't mean you should.
I know they get that voice in their head, like, what if I took a minute away from that rest? It'd be even harder.
I mean,
yeah. But it would be harder, but your intensity would be lower.
Exactly.
Your power output would be lower. And in a workout like this, what you're trying to do is maximize the power output. Yep. I learned a long time ago from Max when he was writing training for me back 2013, 14, 15. He used this every 10-minute format, and you would do a workout that was like 3, maybe 4 minutes in there, and then have this just huge rest window. before you did that workout, and then all that anxiety that we talked about repeating a workout,
it's worse.
Would be concentrated in that.
He's coached all three of us. We've all touched this.
You all know.
That's the kind of stuff. Like every 10 minutes, 30 calorie, 20 thruster, 10 bar muscle. You need to do that leading into a qualifier like this. And you also need to do the threshold stuff. You also need to do all that other stuff. But like you need to do that once every like 10 days to be ready for a workout like this.
The way I'm built, anytime I would see long rests like that, I was like, oh no, this is gonna hurt. Yeah. I know it means I have to go fast.
Yeah, this one is tough too, because I think most people who are more gifted for high power output in short time domains are not volume tolerant. So you do a lot of training for it. They get really good at it. They put a lot of good score up on this, but then it makes it harder to get better at all the other stuff, the longer stuff, whatever. And shorter, or people that are usually optimally suited for CrossFit, who are strong and powerful, but not like maybe peak power expression, and they're more on the endurance and muscle endurance and go for 20 minutes at threshold speed really fast. They don't like to do the like really spillover type workouts. Like a lot of like elites can maybe do this and kind of walk away from it. But if you change that to like 4-minute echo bike max effort, everybody is going into the hurt on that. And a lot of times elites that they're good at it, but they don't like to train it that much just in general. So it's like just a weird type of workout that comes out that exposes people a lot of times, but still is very hard to keep getting better at if you want to be rounded in the sport.
There's definitely people that are listening to this podcast right now that are listening like to us say, hey, you need to do this higher intensity stuff on longer rests. And they're going to try and do it multiple times per week. Listen very carefully right now. This is not something that you do twice or 3 times a week. It's something you do once a week or once every 10 days. And you only do it for like 6 or 8 weeks leading into a competition or a qualifier, not all year long. It's how you get burnt out.
Yeah. It doesn't mean you can't do hard intervals. It just means with these high power movement selection, 3 minutes long, like you just can't take that much of it. Anyways.
And then like obviously on the opposite end of that, there's those that just have the pure skill limitation. And I think the thruster example was something so untraditional that people probably wouldn't expect to think, oh, that's how I would train to get better at this. They would probably mix it all up. But I think grabbing a singular movement like that can be so helpful and just kind of outside of the box and what you're used to training. Same thing with like some of the muscle ups. Figure out a way to build consistent volume each week so that you're pushing yourself and getting used to learning what your abilities are under fatigue so that you take more chances with bigger sets instead of it being so structured where you're not really sure what your limits are in the moment. In a workout like this where you're getting to the last 15 bar muscle ups, you're really out of breath. You're like, do I do 2 right now or do I do 6? You should know at that moment if you've trained well and like have a lot of experience with it.
Yeah, the bar muscle up is different, I feel like, because the limiter could, I don't know where that came
so
from.
Formal.
Sorry. Yeah. It could start as strength. Like at first you need grip strength, core strength, hip explosive ability to be able to time and sequence yourself above it. Just like call it basic requisite strength. Like you should probably be able to do a couple strict pull-ups, maybe some weighted pull-ups, a straight bar dip so you could support yourself over the bar. You meet those basic strength requirements. You're still not able to do the muscle up. So then you need to learn the skill of swinging, jumping up. How do you time where your feet are, your kip swing, your hollow swing, timing of when you get over. And then you're like, cool, you get into, I did a muscle up. And that period could take people, just that could take you a year, 2 years, 3 years, depending on your natural strength requirement or training background and like genetics and all that stuff. Then you get into the next tier. It's like, all right, now you got one, but you got to train to be able to do like 15 in a workout while you're also tired. Yep. So it's like, they need to start kind of simply like Adam had, just one muscle up every minute for 10 minutes. Okay, cool. You got that. Now let's do 2 every minute for 6 minutes. So it's a little bit more volume, a little bit more density. And you got to build capacity up until you're kind of at an elite level or wherever your competitive level is. And you're like, all right, now I can do 30 under fatigue in a certain period of time just by themselves. Then there's a whole new world that opens up where it's like, all right, well, now do this when you're tired and gassed and your arms are numb and your heart rate's at max and you're coming back and forth between movements, and keep them fast and looking like they were when they were fresh.
Yeah.
So that development higher or timeline for most people is like multiple years. And you got to be prepared for wherever you are on that timeline to do those progressions based on where you are in that moment, not looking and being like, well, I'm really at like step 1 of that process, but it's much cooler to just do a Metcon. So I'm going to do 1 muscle up and 50 double unders for 10 minutes. I'm like, all right, well, you did 5 muscle ups in that session. Like it's not going to keep getting better that way. And it's hard because you got to do like an hour session just on your gymnastics.
Yeah, I mean, guiltless plug here, but that's what Mia does in the intermediate path in TTT Compete. She builds an annual progression to work towards that through various cycles. So we have periods of time and phases where we break down the gymnastics, remove them from Metcons in a non-fatigue state and build strength and skill in them. And then it progresses through the year. Then we'll start blending in a little bit of interference and fatigue work. And then now we're putting them back into Metcons, and we run cycles of that through the year. And man, we have so many people improve their gymnastics in a good, consistent manner that way.
And speaking of the program, March 17th, we're going to start a new cycle. And I feel like this year was maybe a little bit more complicated and a lot of stuff going on. So we're going to do some new stuff to get people prepared for this season specifically. We'll have kind of everybody that qualifies when we're done with the Open. We'll have the people that are in the top 1% kind of have a direct preparation path for the online semifinal. And then the Masters athletes that finish in the top 2% will have their own kind of competition peak. So we're going to kind of branch off the program and kind of have these side communities of people that competed, qualified, and are ready to get ready for competition while we're building kind of the main path for people that are like not in there. Because we know 98% or 99% of people are now kind of just like, all right, well, it's over. What do I do now? And we kind of have that as the main group of fitness training moving forward.
Yeah, and not to like put the cart before the horse, because we've got a whole nother week left. But if you kind of know, like, all right, I'm either going to be making the top 1 or 2%, then you follow one of those. So like the in-affiliate semifinal path that we're building towards is going to be like a 7-week peak that's getting athletes ready to do the in-affiliate semifinal. But also, let's say you're not doing the Open season or the game season, it's a great path to follow if you want to get ready for an in-person competition. So you guys helped me write it. You wrote in a lot of really fun, challenging progressions that are going to get people ready for the things we would typically see either in a used to be kind of quarterfinal, which is now semifinal, which we're guessing is going to be like a little bit harder because they're trying to, it's a tester for the games. We don't know.
Honestly, really hard to know. We are definitely guessing.
But it's basically like a guess of quarterfinal plus semifinal combined.
Yeah, but then also too, it kind of serves as a good path for those that want to do an in-person comp that still want to get outside of the gym, running mixed objects.
Yeah, I know when you and I were talking about the CrossFit side of those things, which I wrote, it was basically thinking about in-affiliate semifinals, what like the precedent might have been with quarterfinals before, but also making sure that we're touching the kinds of things that might be in person. That way we can serve 2 different kinds of demographics, the people that are going to be doing in-affiliate semifinals, but the other people who might be sitting out from the official season, but still want to be prepping for whatever their event's going to be. So there's going to be things in there that equipment-wise or even like floor plan-wise, you'd never see at a semifinal, right? Yep. But we know that there's still athletes out there who want to improve, they want to get better at that kind of thing. So it should serve both purposes, ideally.
Yeah. Same thing on the strength side. It was a lot of the things that I was thinking about were when you look at, semifinals or quarterfinals of the past, the things that you really see are barbell cycling, heavier barbell cycling. Like we had the clean and jerk ladder last year. We had, I think it was 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, there was like a power snatch and a taller burpee box jump over. The women had to jump 30. In another year, we had, I think it was 275 clean and jerk burpee box jump over. So just cycling heavy barbells is a theme. And then the other thing we've always seen is some sort of max test. Mm-hmm. And so I actually included in there where there's like a 30-minute window to build to 3 maxes.
Yeah, just total tests.
Yeah, I don't remember what year it was. Was it 23 or 22 that
22 had the CrossFit total.
The quarterfinals. Yeah. What was it with the one with the overhead squat?
Overhead squat, bench
CrossFit.
press.
Oh yeah, the other
total. It was like 2.0 or something like that.
Yeah. So we've incorporated as much of that as we can while maintaining back squat, deadlift, and like maintaining the key components that you have to just kind of be a resilient and robust CrossFitter.
I feel like those progressions are actually really fun too, because you're just super efficient with time. It's like 30 minutes, build to 85% of these 3 lifts.
You learn how to manage the
clock. Learn so much in that process, like figuring out like what weight jumps to go with, like how to be efficient with knowing, all right, do I spend more time on a strict press or less on a squat, like and so forth.
Make sure to have Mike McGoldrick as your bar loader so you can rack it after you miss.
You talking about Alexis? Yeah, dude, that was funny. Tell the story.
You tell it. You had the biggest smile on your face.
I don't know. I kind of blacked out when it happened.
She hit an overhead. So
It was like
it was the
250 or
quarterfinal
something.
workout. She hit an overhead squat with like 30 seconds left and drops it on the ground, turns around to Mike. She's like, I want to do one more. And he's like, okay. And like threw little change plates on the outside of it, shoved Kyle Habito out of the way, and then power clean and put it in the rack. And like in her video, you can see her like ramping up and Mike's walking back with like this smile on his face.
Yeah. I'm a contributor.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that path sounds really fun. And I think we'll set people up for success that want to do the in-affiliate or in-person comp.
And not in person, or sorry, not in affiliate.
Yeah. In affiliate or in-person comp. So going somewhere and doing an event, or a qualifier that's not, the CrossFit one. So, alternatively to that as well, top 2% masters qualifiers. We've got it's a really short turnaround.
Yeah.
So we built a 3-week peak.
Yeah, the 2% timeline is way different. You know, like if you have a longer period of time to get to your qualifier, it allows you to kind of almost go through like another mini training cycle. The way that we were looking at it is, and like week 2 within the master's path is a little bit of a deload in the open. So this week was a little bit lower in terms of total training volume. Next week will be kind of big. And then there's only really 3 weeks to go. We built kind of collectively, I think like I kind of wrote the basic framework and then you guys challenged it, upgrade it, whatever, to create a simulation style workout. Like, all right, now we've done the open, we've done this long training block. Now it's time where like pretty much everyone is going to be measured up for like whether or not they reach their goal. And the testing structure is different. Multiple tests over the course of 2 days, sometimes a repeat within there because you do the tests and then have to repeat one of them. The formats are usually different. There's a max under fatigue, or there's one that's super short, like sub 3 minutes, which we don't normally see. So we created some opportunity to do a simulation of that kind of format stuff, which would be, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think it's week
It's
one
the second week
weekend.
of it.
Second weekend. And then 2 weeks later is the actual competition. We're also running an in-person age group camp that Adam's going to run, where we're going to do those workouts and have our kind of in-person version of that simulation. So I think a lot of it for that group is about sharpening the spear. It's like, hey, you've trained all year, all off season. You've done this whole training block leading in. Now you just went through this competitive, the open, even if it doesn't quote unquote matter to people, it's still stressful. Like,
making top 2% is not easy.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of masters athletes that had to go really hard in it. So.
Yeah, and had to repeat a lot of workouts. So you go through that, and it's like, all right, well, that was just like the buy-in. Like you're not like that doesn't even matter now. Like those are just gone. So now this like final week is about sharpening that mental process to get ready. And once it's over, you kind of have enough time then, if you do move on to the games and the next stage or qualify into these other competitions, there's a lot of time to do like some off season and like kind of change your training structure. So that's kind of the thought process of what the training looks like for top 2%, not as a progressive and long-term in training, because you can't like we're just turning around super quick.
The timeline just forced our hand.
We say masters, it's the divisional peak, but the majority of the followers on our program, masters athletes that do it. So basically the open ends, the next week is the first week of that training block, and then that weekend will be the simulation. You'll have another week that follows that, a couple of easier days after the simulation, going into kind of like a comp prep weekend where we start to taper. And then that following week, that's the third week, is the taper. So it's not a lot of training, but we're excited. All right. And then if you're not doing either one of those, whether you're just kind of opting out of doing the next stage or you didn't qualify, the majority of our followers are going to go into the main track. And that's basically like the meat and potatoes of what TTT is built around or built year round. Basically going back into some off-season style progression. So we'll have foundational strength work, lots of pauses, making sure that we're slowing things down a little bit, getting in a lot of unilateral work to make sure that asymmetries are we're getting back into good balance with structure. And then conditioning, which you helped me write, is going to have some mixed CrossFit Metcons. We'll have some test retests. You want to talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, the test retest is something that I do a lot in individual programs. It's going to be my first time trying to test that in a group program, but I mean, you've heard me talk on these podcasts enough times to know, like, I feel like pacing and self-awareness for the kinds of people who are going to be in that track is vital. Like, just trying to build a better awareness around what my pace is and what I'm able to sustain for certain time domains and inside of certain movements is something that so many people inside of that track are just missing out on. So when we talk about test retest, like, I think it's like a 15 or 20 minute AMRAP. And I'm going to ask people to go through it at different percent efforts, at different transition speeds, at different rep schemes. And what I'm trying to get them to do is not necessarily improve their score overall over the course of it, though I think it's probably going to happen. Improve your awareness and your ability to pace inside of a mixed modal format, which is vital. I mean, we talk about pacing with endurance sports. We talk about self-awareness with weightlifting or powerlifting numbers. Those people know exactly where they want to be. They know what 85% versus 90% versus 95% feels like. Inside of CrossFit, it's really hard to understand like where those efforts lie. And so we're going to try and teach them that inside of this cycle.
Yeah, it's a cool progression. And then I think it's going to be obvious for a lot of people. And I know we have an entire week left of the Open. This is only after week 2, but you're starting to kind of get an idea of like what your big limiters are. And sometimes when you get out of like the Open season or a CrossFit season, you have a very clear glaring weakness that you need to address. And sometimes it's pure strength, or sometimes it's either endurance. Like every Metcon or CrossFit workout was just like, I could not breathe. So we actually created, in addition to those, like we have the strength bias path, which is basically a standalone strength program. And then we have the endurance path, which is 5 days a week of cyclical work. So if you're someone that basically got done with the Open and knows very clearly which one of those limiters it is, we highly suggest following one of those. So strength bias has been a really cool addition to the program because it still follows along with what the main progressions of strength are doing in the main track, but we've basically removed all of the Metcons, so there's no temptation, so you can actually spend time for once getting stronger, and we add in a bunch of extra additional like support work and strength accessories to make sure that it is a truly rounded program. The endurance work you actually helped me write as well. So
hold on, can I plug the strength thing real quick or make a comment on it before you talk about endurance?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Go for
perfect. So Brandy had a shoulder injury in the off season, or maybe not the off season, a couple of weeks ago, or a couple months ago. And one of the things that we had talked about was, you know, she's a master's athlete, has had 2 babies. She's like, I think I want to make it to the next stage in masters. I know I want to compete in some master stuff. I want to get better. And one of the decisions we made was to do more strength bias oriented work just in general. I was like, hey, let's focus on getting your shoulder back to 100%, lowering your overall Metcon volume, allowing you to kind of like get into a new job structure and just follow mostly the strength bias path. And then I'll go in and I'll just like pick stuff. Now, I didn't do the strength bias path for everything. I probably did like more of a hybrid model where it was like 80% of what she did for her training. So she was like highly underprepared for open-based stuff. She did mostly strength work, but she did great in open workout number 1.
Yep.
And I think people at a master's level or who are just naturally maybe a little bit more inclined to endurance that are not as powerful and explosive really underestimate how much better you can get at well-rounded fitness on lowered volume by just getting stronger and being more like healthy, tight, robust. So the strength bias path, I can't encourage enough that if you kind of fit into that, like, I know I need to get stronger to play the game type mold, that it is a really good structure, and it's okay not to do hard Metcons and hard intervals for a period of months after the Open. Like, it's okay. It will not inhibit your long-term progress.
That's the one. I think there's always the temptation that I feel like I'm not getting better or working hard enough if I don't feel beat down from Metcons all the time. And strength bias has been a great way to say, we're removing that for you, follow this path and trust it. And like, people are really enjoying it, and it's helped them have a longer career in the sport because they follow it, and it's improving their longevity because they're okay with they're basically not getting burnt out from not having to make hard decisions of knowing when to step away from Metcons all the time.
Yeah.
And then alternatively, the endurance is just for those that need more cyclical volume. Like, you got to get better at pacing. I think one of the best ways to get better at pacing is to learn how to pace on a single modality element. Like, you've got to learn your gears. You have to learn what short time domains versus medium versus long time domains feel like, and learning your different gears and gaining experience on those is super helpful. If you're always mixing it in with CrossFit, it's really hard to learn a lot and to get a lot of exposure that way in a way that helps you truly understand the gears. There is a time you transition it back in, but that's why we say, like, take a couple of those progressions and mix them in with on top of the CrossFit work that we're doing.
Yeah. I think that there's value in isolating them, but if you're going to mix them in, make sure that it's not at a sacrifice of quality inside of those things that are your weakness. You need to make sure that you're very mindful of how you're executing those sessions to get anything out of them. Like, if you just happen to throw in an endurance progression after a Metcon day and you just kind of go through it mindlessly because you're so tired, you might as well have not done that. Just save the energy, get out of the gym for the day, come back the next day. If it is your priority, if it is your weakness, make sure that you hit it fresh and make sure that you're really mindful when you do it. That's really the only way to get value out of those things.
I think the other thing is that so the cyclical machines are good because they give you instantaneous feedback. You can literally get heart rate data or pace data at an instantaneous level, which is very hard to do in a Metcon. You can't measure in your head like, oh, my reps have just slowed to 2 seconds per rep. Like you don't know, and you could feel like you're going at full speed. Yeah, it would be awesome, but the technology is not there yet. So that kind of just agrees with your point that the cyclical starting as the base learning for pacing can be just a really good general starting point if you need to get better.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that pretty much covers like a large amount of buckets for different athletes that are kind of making their way through the season, or really like have kind of gone away from following CrossFit as being the CrossFit Games season as being like the main target for the year. Like we still have options that we're going to continue to build year round and have these sidestep paths that allow you to peak for competitions. If you've got specific skill limitations, like if it was just purely learning and getting better at bar muscle ups, like follow the bar muscle up skill program that you can add to your timeline in the program. And there's so many different options to get better at individual things. You guys want to talk about 25.3 predictions now?
Ooh, sure.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
all right, go ahead.
I mean, let's just address the elephant in the room. The workout is supposedly leaked. A lot of people say they already know it. I haven't seen it yet, so hit me up with a DM.
Yeah.
I've heard the movements, but I don't know anything outside of that.
Yeah, I heard some movements. I think I can share what movements I heard, whatever. Like at this point, I don't think it matters. However, take this all with a grain of salt, because leading into this week, the day of the announcement, I heard 3 separate league workouts, and all 3 of those people were very confident that this was the workout coming out. And obviously 2 of them were wrong. 1 of them was right. So I know like information is getting leaked, but I don't know how much
it's intentional.
Yeah, it's intentional. It's accurate. People are probably just doing it to get like, oh, I got the answers, but then there's no accountability if they're wrong. I'm not calling them up and being like, hey, you were wrong.
I feel like I know nothing. I'll never forget the time that Rich and Matt did the demo at the ranch. I can't remember who else, Ben Smith, I think.
What was the workout?
It was the final open workout.
Oh, thruster burpee.
We'd already done burpees that year. And I remember I had like my movement list. I go through and I scratch it off each week. And I'm like, all right, these are potential movements remaining. And then he announced thruster burpee. And I was like, wait a minute.
Huh? You did burpees.
No, you can't do that.
You can't double burpee a burpee.
And I'm wondering to this day, I'm like, was there a different workout? And he was just like, whatever, screw it. Like, we're doing this.
Yeah,
I don't know. But yeah, do you guys have any predictions?
Yeah, I heard row, wall, walk as 2 movements. I don't know how accurate that is.
I heard barbell cycling. So
so completely inaccurate.
I heard a 5K run.
That would be awesome.
That wishful
measured with one
measured
of those things.
shuttles.
No, I've done
on a 30-foot or 15-foot.
Yeah, just that same
a
length.
15-foot section.
Oh,
am I the only one that wrote down a prediction?
I didn't.
Go ahead.
You didn't tell us to write down predictions.
Oh, maybe
Go
I
ahead,
didn't.
Mike.
You guys
Maybe
are so unprepared. I can't believe this.
We did a whole podcast prepared.
Oh,
and you
man.
guys
I
just
wrote
like,
down-
oh,
all
no
over his-
shit.
yeah.
Oh,
good one, Mike.
This is going to be the worst workout ever.
These guys.
Let's hear it.
What good friends.
21-minute clock, 14-minute AMRAP.
Shitty.
Why isn't it 13? It should be 13.
I love this. Let's do this
Critique it
again.
before I even finish, please.
Okay, sorry.
21-minute clock, 14-minute AMRAP, 21 cow row.
Oh.
Quit shaking your arms. You're going to make me laugh again. 14 deadlifts, 7 wall walks. Deadlifts hit 225, 155. And then at the 14-minute mark, 7 minutes to final 1RM snatch. Ooh. That'd be really fun. We've never max snatched in the open.
Ever?
Oh, I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Well, they'd have
we've done ladders.
This has like a
17.3
15
chest to bar, right?
Yeah.
This has like a 15 A, B.
Yeah. Hold on.
feel
Was
to
it
it.
14-minute AMRAP? How many deadlifts? How many
21
burpees?
cow row, 14 deadlifts, 225, 155, 7 wall walks.
That's so stupid.
I didn't write it.
Just kidding.
We've reached our limit.
We talked for too long. All right. Well, in all seriousness,
was leaked.
Yeah. Was that the actual leaked workout?
No, he said he didn't
okay.
know the leaked workout. He definitely wrote that.
Okay.
I hope there is a strength component. I hope that it doesn't just end with those thrusters. I think especially girls, 85-pound thrusters is not enough of a separator given like what we've seen so far on the aggregate, the preference towards a certain body type and kind of athlete that we've seen in the first 2 weeks. I hope that there's some sort of strength component, whether it's 1RM or barbell cycling or something else.
Yeah, I agree with that. And on a serious note, we talked about training and making fun of Mike, but even if you are not 1%, not 2%, I had already 4 conversations in my DMs of people who were already kind of checked out. They were like, it didn't go the way I wanted, blah, blah, blah. If you do have ambitions as a competitor, try to finish strong no matter where you are on it. Because the skill and the behaviors and the habits of kind of pushing yourself, dealing with competition at a high level, full focus, I feel like they're behaviors that become your habits, that become your game day preparation and process. And if you start building processes where every time a competition's not going the way you want, you just check out, move on, and go back to training, you're not really developing as a competitor, even if you're getting more fit. So if you do intend on staying with the competitive realm, I think just one reminder to finish strong in week 3. I know we talked about point 2, but you still got 33% of the leaderboard unset after 2 weeks.
Or more.
Yeah.
Because
it could be half
it could
the
be
leaderboard.
a 2-part workout. So we
Even
could
then-
literally be we're filming this podcast right now, not even halfway, but
Not even.
we could literally be at the halfway point right now.
I would
when you
say
checked
even
out.
then, like developing as a competitor is really good and beneficial for the other 98% of people. I think that giving up like partway into something that you said you're going to commit to is just not like the kind of person that you want to be. Like if this is something that isn't your competitive sport, if you don't have aspirations of competing at a high level, you're doing it because you enjoy it. You're doing it because it's either a hobby and you like the challenge, or you're doing it for your general health and wellness. And to turn your back on either of those because you don't like how you compare on a leaderboard, or like you didn't live up to your own expectations, I feel like would be a huge mistake that so many people would regret. So if you're disenchanted with it, if you're disappointed with your performance, do the best you can to put that behind you. Do the best you can to try and understand where the real value out of sport lies for anybody. It's just like digging in and learning how to like navigate these obstacles that come up.
Developing
Well
yourself as
said.
a human. I love it.
Love it. All right. Thank y'all for listening.